Imagine waking up to a world where the ordinary has become extraordinary. An outbreak of the undead has thrown society into chaos. It's not just a nightmare, it's a reality. But what exactly would happen if a zombie apocalypse started today? So let's imagine a world in which zombies have become commonplace. Let's start with the fact that the governments of most countries would most likely lose control of the situation, which would lead to chaos, destruction of infrastructure, and the death of governments. Many states would simply cease to exist or break up into small, autonomous groups. In some parts of our planet, where armies were able to maintain order, military dictatorships could arise. Military structures would become the main element of management, ensuring the safety of the remaining people. Humanity would start organizing into small groups or clans, building new alliances and autonomous communities for survival. Regional alliances could be formed based on the ability to defend and share resources. The collapse of the global economy is inevitable. Commodity exchange and international trade would cease, and modern supply chains would simply collapse. People would return to subsistence farming, where the exchange of products and skills would become the main way of existence. This would lead to a crisis of resources. Food, fuel, and water would become one of the most valuable resources. Access to these resources could lead to constant wars between groups of survivors. People would forget what culture and society are, since most of modern culture and art would cease to exist, as humanity would focus solely on survival. Global cultural institutions such as museums, theaters, and libraries would become forgotten. Humanity would return to simpler forms of culture and life when traditional crafts, survival skills, and oral traditions would dominate. Glorification of hunters, farmers, and fighters would become the new norm. A possible development could be a religious upsurge. Many people could see something divine in the zombie apocalypse, which could lead to the strengthening of religious cults and mysticism. Perhaps there will be new religious movements explaining the catastrophe as a punishment or a test for humanity. How would a zombie apocalypse affect the planet? Wildlife and ecology would probably benefit from the apocalypse, as humans would no longer be able to hunt them and destroy their habitat. Wild animals could begin to populate the deserted cities. Some animal species might have adapted to the new reality. For example, scavengers and predators could use zombies as a food source. In addition, insects and bacteria could evolve to decompose dead flesh faster. Nature would begin to recover, and in a few decades, forests, jungles, and savannas would take over cities. This would lead to the formation of new ecosystems on the ruins of humanity. The development of science is also expected to collapse, because without the supporting infrastructure, most high technologies would be lost. The remnants of humanity would be forced to return to simpler methods of production and survival. Mechanical devices, such as generators and hand tools, would become the most valuable. Small groups of scientists or doctors could continue to try to find cures for the zombie virus. But due to a lack of resources and knowledge, these attempts would be extremely limited and rare. If humanity came up with a cure for zombie infection, it would be the most important event in the history of survival. However, even with the medicine, the world would change forever. The drug would probably be difficult and expensive to manufacture, which would cause problems with scaling it up. At first, it would only be used on survivors or those who have just been infected. The treatment of already zombified people could be more difficult or impossible. The main task would be the production of the vaccine and its distribution. This would require a global effort, especially if a significant part of humanity is already infected. Vaccinated people could start rebuilding society again. If it was a vaccine, it would prevent infection, but already infected people would remain zombies. If it is a medicine, it could treat those who have already turned into zombies, restoring their mind and body. Although this process might have been painful and long, what advantages can there be between humans and zombies? Of course, the fact that they do not know how to swim at all, and a possible development would be the construction of water fortresses or even cities. If people started hiding from zombies in water towns, it would lead to the creation of unique settlements and survival strategies. In floating cities after the zombie apocalypse, people's lives turned into something completely new and unusual. These settlements were huge platforms made of metal and floating structures created from former ships, oil rigs, or even recycled containers. Cities were distributed on the water away from infected shores, in safe zones of oceans and large lakes, where zombies simply could not reach them. Cities on the water were truly amazing engineering wonders. The platforms were connected by bridge-like walkways and could be adapted and expanded to accommodate more people as needed. Some parts of the city floated freely, while others could be anchored to stay in place. Each sector of the city fulfilled its function. Residential areas, agricultural modules for growing food, laboratories, repair shops, and shipping berths. People in floating cities have learned to live in an autonomous economy. Aquaponics, a system in which plants were grown that fed on fish waste, became the main source of food. This made it possible to maintain small but stable food chains on the platforms. Some platforms also turned into real farms for breeding fish and shellfish, and the survivors hunted marine life. Over time, residents of water towns have formed their own unique culture based on living in conditions of constant isolation and dependence on water. New traditions and rituals related to the sea have emerged, celebrations of algae harvests or large fishing festivals, where residents exchange goods and news. The roles and professions in the water cities were very different from the traditional ones. Specialized groups of aquafarmers, floating platform maintenance engineers, boat pilots, and resource hunters have emerged. The society was divided into cells, each of which was responsible for certain functions. Due to the close interaction between the groups, their lives were stable and interdependent. Thus, water cities became not only a refuge for survivors, but also a symbol of humanity's adaptation to new conditions, where life on the water gave a chance to escape the horrors of the zombie apocalypse and start a new civilization free from old problems. 10 years after the start of the zombie apocalypse, the world would be completely different, even if the zombie threat had not yet disappeared. A world in which there will be a sharp decrease in population. The human population would decrease by 80 to 90%. The surviving people would unite in small isolated groups, and the settlements that once teemed with life would turn into empty ghost towns. During this decade, only the strongest, most skilled, and adaptable people would have survived. In such conditions of survival, weak and sick people would die out, and those with physical strength, endurance, survival skills, or leadership qualities would become the foundation of a new society. Due to harsh conditions and lack of resources, the birth rate would decrease. Young people would grow up in constant danger, learning self-defense and survival skills from an early age. Autonomous communities. The remnants of humanity would live in small, autonomous communities, each of which would be under the control of local leaders, most often former military personnel, surviving hunters, or strong fighters. These communities could be both relatively peaceful and aggressive towards other groups. In the absence of the old governments, new harsh systems of rules and morals would have emerged. Killing for resources could become the norm, and harsh punishments for violating community laws could become part of everyday life. Trade might have become barter again, without a monetary economy, and in some regions a new kind of feudal society might have emerged, where the strongest and most armed leaders controlled territories and collected taxes or resources from surrounding residents in exchange for protection. A zombie apocalypse would be a grandiose cultural, political, and environmental cataclysm, changing all aspects of life on Earth. If you like the video, subscribe for more what-if content.